My name's Vicki Reynolds. I am a digital manager for Multiplex Construction, also a core team member of Women in BIM, along with Louise Kelly, who is also here today, and a future skills ambassador for an organisation called CADCO, who prepare young digital engineering apprentices for the industry. They do some cracking work. But I am here with my Multiplex hat on today. And I'm going to talk to you about our decision to become a model-first organisation, what that was like as a commitment for the company, and how we went and rolled that out. So I'd better start by telling you a little bit about Multiplex. I'd be naive to think that you all knew exactly who we were and what we do, because we don't operate in Ireland. So we were founded in Australia in the 60s. We were established in London, or the UK, in the 90s. And now our north-south hemisphere split is pretty much 50-50. We're slightly bigger in, around Australia. Our workbook is pretty strong, and when it comes to our projects, we have a type. We don't do a huge amount of projects, but the projects that we do are very high spec, often tall towers, small footprints in the middle of big city centres, very complex, and for quite established clients. We don't do a huge amount of projects, but we like to think that we do them well, and because we're a relatively small company in comparison to some of the other tier 1 contractors in the UK, we can manage change quite efficiently, and that is where we have been quite successful in this change towards digitalization. So what does model first mean to us? Basically, every element in our design is modeled, every package, for every project, no ifs, no buts, no ambiguity. Sounds like quite a big statement. It wasn't easy. It took us a lot of commitment and a fair bit of time, mainly to pluck up the courage to do this. So how did we do it? The model-first approach actually was part of a much bigger strategy for Multiplex. It came from a lot of conversations where we sat down and we talked about things like efficiency and waste and health and safety. And we identified 4 areas where we wanted to become better. And the first one of those was planning. We wanted to visualize progress better, and we wanted to have a really intricate understanding of our programs and the implications of any change in those programs in a way that we hadn't been able to manage before. And also operations. We wanted the right people to have the right information at the right time to make the right decisions. Sounds simple, doesn't it? And for design management, we wanted to really intricately understand every grain of our design. So really detailed granularity, so that we could understand the implications of any changes before we made the decision to change, not during, not after. And in terms of commercial, we wanted to collect data. We wanted to understand how our projects were running, not so that it could affect those projects, but so that that data can help us make better decisions moving forward. We were collecting so much information from so many different platforms, and it was just disappearing, and we weren't learning from that. And I think I'm not being too bold to say that that's a problem that a lot of people in the industry are having. So to alleviate these issues, or to become more efficient in these areas, we identified 6 sort of points to focus on, and they beautifully fell into 2 strands. One focus was data, and the other focus was around people. And so the first thing we had to do in terms of data and information was to commit. We had to start telling people, we are a model-first organization now. This is what it means to us. This is what we expect from our suppliers. And most nerve-wrackingly, going to our clients and saying, this is the way that we work. And if the information that we're going to inherit from your project isn't up to scratch, we'll have to put points in place to make sure that we get what we need before we start that project. We thought that that would scare clients off a little bit to begin with. Ironically, actually, it seems to have shown a little bit of courage from our side and a little bit of confidence. And we found that a lot of our clients actually put their trust in us. We haven't seen a drop-off in work winning yet, which is great, because that's my job on the line. So that was the first thing we did. It was commit. And then from there, it was identify what model first really meant to us in terms of our minimum digital standard. So when we're talking to our supply chain, what do we expect from them? So what we came up with were 5 really, really simple things that we wanted our subcontractors and our suppliers to achieve. We wanted everything to be in 3D, and that's all design packages. And we wanted a minimum level of detail. It was 300, so working on the AIA spec. Now that's minimum. We only went up from there as the projects progressed. And all drawings were to be derived from the model. And that's the one that caused the most issues. And that is where we actually had to look at things like our contracts. And the final thing that we asked was that everything was classified to an industry standard classification system, Uniclass. And we specified where that would be a system classification, and we specified where it needed to go down to a product specification, classification, sorry. And when we started to show this to our supply chain, which I'll talk more about in a minute, we actually got a huge amount of acceptance from them. So the only point there that caused any kind of issue was taking the drawings from the model. So we alleviated that in contracts by saying, we want wherever possible drawings to be derived from a model or cut from a model. And where it's not possible, you as our subcontractor are responsible for making sure that the information is identical across all of the different types of information. And people actually were quite happy to sign up to that. We gave them all of the uses of the models, all of the ways that we were expecting to analyze the data that they gave us, and that open communication led to a much better working relationship. So we're pretty much at 100% delivery across all of our projects for all 5 of those points now for our model first projects. And then the next thing we did in terms of data is we began creating what we call virtual mock-ups. So tall towers. We were picking areas of high repeatability or high concern, high complexity, and we were modeling them up to intricate detail at a really early stage. Things like common apartment types, the common bathroom types, bathroom pods, modeling them up to sort of level of detail 400 and doing all kinds of analysis. Things like your basic clash detection, obviously, but then things like testing for structural integrity. We were doing things like construction simulation, and we were testing maintenance and access, but we were doing all of this virtually and at a point before we'd procured any subcontractors. So what that gave us was a really solid stance when we handed that information over to say, we know that this design in this area, for an area that is repeated 100 and 150 times throughout this building, is solid. We know that your price that you give us, your price that you give us can be a confident price. And then we knew as well that we were expecting limited change around those areas. Everyone had a little bit more confidence around the data and the information that we were dealing with in those areas, and we've seen great results already. So things that have been picked up include on our The Broadway project, we identified at a really early stage that there wasn't enough structural integrity in the wall of one of the bathroom pods to hold the cistern and the MEP that was sitting behind it. So that meant that a complete redesign, which was done by the consulting design team rather than the subcontractor. So that was included in their fees. That was something that we didn't have to pay for further down the line, which we would have done in a traditional scenario. Our digital managers and their lovely smiley faces are all incredibly technically capable, but they're all people as well. So that's something that we looked for when we started to recruit. It was, these guys need to go on site and they need to be likable. And they need to work with a large team, they need to command authority, but they also need to be able to teach and train, and they have to be able to gain people's trust. So we put them through a whole load of extra training as well. We delivered train the trainer sessions to them, so they now know how to deliver training to large groups, how to do one-on-one digital upskilling, how to deal with difficult questions or reluctant learners, and things like this seem so simple, and it cost us very little money, but it made a massive difference on site. And we also negotiated that our digital managers, they needed the same level of responsibility and the same level of respect as our design managers, our commercial managers, anybody else in a senior decision-making position on the project, which ironically was something that they weren't given in prior scenarios. And a lot of our digital managers report straight into the project director, or if they don't report into the director, there is an open means of conversation. So basically, they are there on the sites pushing digitalization with people who trust them and people that they trust. And then finally, digital skills. This was something that I had a really huge input in. We talked for ages and ages about how we were going to upskill our staff base. We went from, okay, we need to give everyone Revit training, or we need to identify specific skills for specific people for different roles, to actually stripping that right back and saying, actually, can we just teach people to navigate the model first? So we rolled out for 600 staff basic model viewer training, Navisworks Freedom in the morning, Synchro Open Viewer in the afternoon, a day session. And the really important thing was that we were able to find a training provider, which is actually CitA, who I think are here today. Out of everyone we went to, I was saying, okay, I want everyone to use their own machines, their own hardware. I want them to use their own software and their own software logins and their own models, site models as well. And every training provider was a little bit nervous about that because there were warning pop-ups opening up when they opened the models in the morning. People would ask questions that were project specific. They'd find clashes in the middle of the session. It was a little bit nuts. And the agenda had to be very fluid for the training sessions. But what it did is two things. First of all, it got the guys looking at their own projects in a 3D environment and asking those questions and writing notes and following them up with the digital manager the next day. And the second part is then the next day when they went into their office and they opened up their laptops, the software was there. It was how they'd left it previously. The way the screen was set up looked the same, and the link to their project models existed already. And that's the biggest drop-off you have when people go to training, especially digital skills training. I mean, you guys are all probably digitally savvy to be sat in this room, but it's terrifying when you go for a training session, you're taught a bunch of stuff, and the next day you open your laptop and it doesn't look the same as it did the day before, and you just switch off and you can't be bothered anymore. So, that was a massive success for us, and we managed to train about 600 people, anyone with an operational or a technical role in the business, and feedback from those sessions have been great. And people then came to us and said, after that session, I actually think I could do quantity takeoffs. And you go, oh, well, yeah, funny you should say that. You actually can. Let's get you a Navisworks Manage license, and we'll get you some extra training, and we'll teach you, Mr. Quantity Surveyor, how to do a takeoff on the model. Because it was their idea and not something being forced on them, it was the movement happened in a much more fluid way and much more quickly. And then finally, in terms of people, it was our supply chain engagement. So this is a picture from a supplier day that we had. 30 of our main subcontractors came into the Multiplex office, and we asked them to bring 2 people. We asked them to bring an executive, so CEO, MD, something like that, and who they would consider their BIM lead. And funnily enough, for a lot of these organizations, it was the first time that those 2 people had spent any decent amount of time together. And we threw them in a room for a whole day. We had the roundtable discussions. We presented to them what our minimum standard was and asked them to pick holes in it. We said, what is wrong with it? Why can't you deliver it? And actually, in terms of our requirements, there were no issues. Everyone thought that it was pretty logical and it was pretty easy to deliver. The main concern was that some of the smaller organizations didn't have the in-house capability. And from that session, we were able to negotiate the best way to manage that. So we agreed to share with them all of our training content. So we gave them all the guides that we'd paid to be developed. We gave them access to 30, I think, 2-minute training videos for different BIM softwares, all for different activities that you could do in different softwares, just 1 or 2-minute quick training videos. And we also managed to negotiate a discount for our training provider for Revit training for anyone who was one of our subcontractors. And then we said to them, okay, we have a list of 3 preferred suppliers, 3 BIM consultants that will come on board and will model for you, but we'll also upskill you in the process. So the first time you work on one of our model first projects, include that in your costs, and we understand, and we'll appreciate that. And you won't lose out on the job just because you are subbing out that work. That's fine. And then the second time that you're on a model first project with us, we expect that cost to go down a little bit. And then the third or the fourth time, we expect that cost not to be there. We expect you to be upskilled and you to be digitally enabled. So this is in the best interests of us because we get you working on our projects in a way that we need you to be working. But it's also great for you because it gives you a kick to properly upskill yourself and stay relevant in the market. And another thing that came out of this session is between me and Tom Loader, our head of digital, I think we gave out about 300 business cards. And we said, if you have concern on a project and you don't feel comfortable going to the project team, give one of us a call. And we won't ask any additional questions. We won't use that information to beat you or judge you. We'll just have a chat and we'll see if we can help you and upskill you, because the more we know about our supply chain and our subcontractors and their capability, the more we can successfully manage a project. So then, moving on from there, these are all the projects that we have that have digitally enabled sections on them. And all the ones that are highlighted, we would consider to be model first, fully model first projects. And the really interesting thing about that, so the ones that are in orange started since January 2019, which is when we kicked off with this initiative. And the four in white are actually older, slightly more legacy projects that when they saw the benefits that were coming through from the model first projects, the project director came to me and said, I want a piece of that. What can we do to make ourselves more efficient? What can we write into the contracts moving forward? Or what can we try and encourage our subcontractors to do in terms of model production to ensure that we're getting some of those benefits as well? And that there is 90% of our workbook at the moment. So by December 2019, we will be 100% model first. Why? This wasn't easy. It cost us more in the long run. It took a lot of negotiation and it was really difficult. So why did we bother? Basically, our focus was consistency, simplicity, and precision. We know that there's a lot of sexy tech out there. We know that digital twins are cool, but to be honest, we want to get our house in order first. What is the point in paying surplus money for extra tech and for data mapping for every different project you can do, when actually you could be spending time and money making sure you've got a common language across your projects, making sure that you've got a really granular understanding of absolutely everything that you're constructing, and that you can make better decisions in a more efficient way, faster. So that was why we did it. And we have already seen a lot of outcomes from this. And the first one is dashboarding. So we were able to hire a chief product officer, a real techie data guy, and he converted all the data that we're now collecting in a common language across all of our projects into dashboards. So we not only can have the right information in the hands of the right people at the right time, but it's easy to understand and it can be manipulated in a number of different ways so that we can make those better decisions. So our CEO can see a cross-project comparison and the guy on site can see the progress of a concrete pour. And everybody has the information in their hands. So you can access, so our operatives on site can access this. This is Dalux, this is one of the platforms we use, where you can either look at model information or drawing information, wherever you're most comfortable, or flip between the two. And a guy can look at a wall, see a snag, tag that exactly where he's standing, write a comment, and that kicks off a whole other process of informing people of next steps and actions, sending information to our dashboards. We can then analyze who's causing us the most issues, how quickly people are resolving things like snags and problems and quality assurance. And it means that we can then manage our projects better, and all for minimal effort. And we have seen a reduction in issues. We're collecting a lot of anecdotal evidence at the moment. We only started this in January, but already we have people who were completely uninterested in the digital agenda at the beginning, now coming and raving about how much nicer their projects are, how much more confident people are, how they're making better decisions. On the Broadway, for instance, we were able to bring in the MEP subcontractor much earlier. They fully coordinated the MEP design before we laid any concrete. which meant we knew exactly where all the builders' work holes are meant to be. We've just started laying that concrete, and so far we are already seeing a reduction in where we think we're gonna see a reduction in things like diamond drilling. So our next steps are to start quantifying that and to start sharing those success stories as well. That's what we want to do. We want to tell everyone about our successes and help other organizations to develop in the same way. So what's next for us? Like we say, we want to share the stories, we want to collect some objective data and some objective statistics, but we also are going to move from subcontractors to design consultants and clients. We're going to start dealing with them to educate on our minimum standard, because we think actually we're not asking for much, and if design consultants can start modeling to a decent level of detail and start classifying elements, then we're going to start inheriting better information. We do mainly private work. We don't really do public sector work, which means we very rarely get BIM requirements, or we very rarely have an EIR on a project, and if we're lucky, we'll get a full set of models. So our next step is to target those architects who often work in the private sector and try to upskill them as well. And then we can start looking at the sexy stuff. Once we've got our data being organized in an intelligent way, once we've got our common language and our standardization, and once our staff are really confident working in a digital environment, then we can bolt on the sexy tech. Then we can talk about disrupting. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, let me know. Anyone who's been following the CitA hashtag on Twitter knows that I'm a Twitter addict. So please do follow me on there and join the conversation. Thank you.
Vicki, thank you very much for keeping to time for a very active presentation. We would have time for one question if there is one. If there's a question from the audience.
Yeah.
Was there any questions? I might be permitted maybe to ask one question. One thing I've noticed over the years is that when we didn't have BIM, we used to think an awful lot about clashes. And now that we have BIM, we seem to be ending up with thousands and thousands of clashes. Do you think we've got lazy?
With our designing?
Yes.
It's difficult because I only have 5-6 years of experience in the industry. Over those 5 or 6 years, I haven't seen us get any lazier, but that doesn't mean that we haven't. I think it's more, we're being more aware of our issues. So we're finding with older buildings, there are problems with the way that they were designed that we only identify maybe 5 or 10 years into the use of them, and maybe structural issues. Now with things like BIM, we're identifying those issues earlier and having to talk about them in a more open forum, which is making us more aware. Yeah, I don't think we're lazier. I think we're probably just talking about and identifying issues more. Yeah.
Okay, please do thank Vicki. Vicki, thank you very much.
Thank you.